The first sound was not the storm. The storm had been there for hours, clawing at the roof, shoving snow through every crack in the clapboards, making the little homestead groan like something alive. Ellen Rook knew that sound. She had lived with it for 7 winters. This was different. A dry, deliberate crack rolled through the floorboards and down into the stone-lined cellar beneath her kitchen. Her dog, Rusk, lifted his head, not barking, not yet. Just watching the ceiling with his ears forward and his body low. Ellen sat perfectly still on an overturned flour keg, one hand on the dog's neck, the other resting on the handle of a black iron laundry press. 22 pounds of iron. A thing meant for shirt collars and table linen. Tonight, it was the only weapon she had. The room around her was not a cellar in any ordinary sense. It was 8 feet wide, 10 feet long, and 11 feet under the floor. She had lined it with riverstone, packed the seams with clay, and braced the ceiling with spruce beams thick enough to hold a freight wagon. One wall held sacks of cornmeal, dried apples, beans, salt pork, tallow candles, and coffee sealed in tins. Enough for 15 months if she measured each meal. Another wall held 2 water barrels and a little brick stove no bigger than a washtub. Its narrow 5-inch flue climbed through the kitchen, hid inside the main hearth, and vented beside the chimney where no passing rider would notice it. In the corner, a miner's safety lamp burned with a clean blue bead of flame. Ellen had bought it from a Butte man who said it would tell her when air turned bad. As long as the flame stayed blue, she could breathe. As long as the vent stayed open, this place could keep her alive. That had been the point. She had built it to outlast weather. She had built it to outlast hunger. She had built it because a woman living alone in the high country learned early that a locked door was not safety. It was only a request. The blow above her landed again. This time the dog growled. Ellen closed her fingers around the laundry press. A voice came through the storm from outside the cabin. "Ma'am, I saw your smoke. My mule broke a leg. Let me in or I'll freeze." The words were shaped like a plea, but Ellen heard the space between them. The voice was too steady, too close to the door, too certain that someone was listening. She did not answer. A hard boot slammed into the kitchen door. The plea vanished. "I know you're in there." The man did not shout it like a desperate traveler. He said it like a buyer announcing a price. Ellen's thumb moved once over Russ's collar. "Stay." The dog trembled, but he obeyed. Above her, the man tested the cabin the way a wolf tests a fence, a hand at the shutters, a boot on the porch boards, a metal tool scraping under a latch, then silence. Then the sound Ellen had dreaded since the day she first lifted the kitchen floor. He had stopped trying the door. He was cutting the wall, not near the hinges, not near the lock. Beside the west window, where the logs were thinnest and the wind had already worked the chinking loose. He was patient. That was what made her cold. A drunk would rage at the door. A starving man would cry. This one worked. Blow after blow, same rhythm, same aim. The cabin above her shook with each strike, and the little lamp flame leaned sideways with the vibration. Ellen forced herself to count. Air, food, water, exit. She had food. She had water. She had one hidden exit through the trap in the kitchen floor, and beside that trap, bolted upright against the stone wall, she had a sliding plate of boiler iron she could drag into place from below. If the storm took the cabin, the iron would keep the cellar sealed. If a bear broke through, the iron would hold. If a man found the trapdoor, the iron would buy her days. But no plan survives the thing it never imagined. The axe stopped. For 3 breaths the blizzard filled the world. Then a log gave way. Another split after it. Cold air screamed through a fresh hole in the cabin wall. He was inside. The footsteps crossed her kitchen slowly. A chair scraped. A cup fell. Something glass broke. He was not searching like a man trying to survive the night. He was inventorying. Ellen could picture him by sound alone, turning his head, looking at her bed, the stove, the pantry, the floorboards. Her whole life reduced to places a stranger might pry open. The footsteps stopped directly above her, right above the bearskin rug that covered the trap. Rusk's growl became a thin vibration under her palm. Ellen did not breathe. The man shifted his weight. One plank creaked. Then another. Had he seen the cut line? Had snowmelt darkened the seam? Had the rug corner lifted when she came down? She had built the trap to disappear. 4 winters of going in and out had taught her every mistake that could give it away. Still, she knew the truth every hidden thing carries. A secret is only invisible until the wrong person is looking for it. The footsteps moved away. Ellen's lungs opened. Not enough to sigh, only enough to live. Above her, the man went quiet. The quiet lasted so long that her fear tried to make bargains. Maybe he had only wanted shelter. Maybe he had found the flour and the bacon and would sleep by the stove until morning. Maybe he would be gone when the sun came up. Maybe the hole in her wall could be repaired. Maybe she could wait him out. Ellen was good at waiting. 7 winters had made her good at it. Then the sound came from beside her face. Not from the ceiling, not from the trap, from the flue. The little stovepipe ticked once, twice. Then a man's voice slid down the metal, hollow and close. "I found your breathing hole." Ellen's blood seemed to stop moving. The voice chuckled softly. "Smart woman, hiding under your own kitchen. I almost missed it." Almost. That one word told her everything. He had not come alone. And the voice confirmed it. "My brother saw the pipe outside. Says it's too narrow for a real chimney. Says no widow runs a stovepipe that clean unless she's got something worth hiding." Brother. There were 2 of them, not a storm, not a trespasser, a siege. The safety lamp flame trembled, still blue, barely. The man at the pipe went on, friendly now. "Here's how this ends. You lift that floor and come up. We take food, coin, maybe that team of yours if the weather leaves them alive. Nobody needs to be hurt." Ellen said nothing. A dull thud came through the pipe. Then another. The blue flame shrank. The air changed so gently it was almost polite. Smoke from the little stove hesitated at the mouth of the flue, then drifted back into the room in a thin gray ribbon. The man lowered his voice. "Or I close this pipe, and you learn how small that room really is." Ellen looked at the miner's lamp. The blue bead fluttered orange at the edges. Her head began to ache, not panic. Not yet. Chemistry. Bad air collects before a body admits what is happening. The stove that had kept her warm was becoming poison. The walls that had promised safety were holding the poison in. The fortress was changing shape. It was becoming a box. Rusk whined, confused now, his mouth open, his tongue showing. Ellen could hear the second man outside, or above, moving somewhere near the broken wall. A scrape, a cough, a muttered curse. They had watched her. They knew she was alone. They had waited for the weather to cut her off from every honest road, and now they wanted her to open the floor herself. That was the worst of it, not the axe, not the pipe, not even the brother. They wanted her fear to do the final work. They wanted the shelter she had built with her own hands to teach her surrender. Her eyes moved across the cellar. The sacks, the water, the brace beams, the iron plate. Every inch of it had been made from caution. Every inch had a reason. She remembered why she started digging. A man at the Fort Benton supply yard, 5 years earlier, had followed her from the dry goods counter to the hitch rail, smiling with no warmth in his face. Nothing happened that day. Nothing he could be named for. But Ellen had felt herself measured. Her cabin measured. Her distance from help measured. That night she had looked at her door and understood that wood only stops the weather. So she dug. She dug through frost. She hauled stone at night. She bought pipe in 2 short lengths, so no clerk would ask what she was building. She dragged the boilerplate down here with a block and tackle and nearly tore her shoulder out of its socket. She had spent 5 years believing the room beneath her kitchen was proof that fear could be engineered into safety. Now the room was proving the opposite. The lamp flame went orange. Rusk staggered once. Ellen made her decision without drama. A decision like that does not feel brave from the inside. It feels like arithmetic. Down here she would die. Up there she might. That was the entire calculation. She moved. First, she yanked open the stove door and shoveled the burning coals into a clay bucket, smothering them under ash and sand until the smoke stopped thickening. Then she plunged her face into the water barrel. The cold hit her skull like a hammer. She soaked her hair, her collar, and the wool scarf around her throat. She pulled the scarf over her mouth. The air was already thinner. Her hands wanted to shake. She did not allow it. She lifted the black laundry press from the floor. 22 pounds of iron, long handle, flat head, made to smooth wrinkles from fabric. Made by someone who had never imagined a woman would swing it under her own kitchen while 2 men tried to smoke her out. Ellen looked at Rusk and pointed to the far wall. Down. Her voice was barely a whisper. The dog dropped. He trusted the command more than he understood the danger. Above her, the man at the pipe called down again. Last chance, widow. Ellen stood under the trap. She waited until he shifted closer to the hearth, until the pipe scraped again, until she could hear the exact place of his body by the sound of his breathing. Then she drove both shoulders upward. The bearskin rug flipped. The small table slammed over. Cold, clean air poured down through the opening like mercy. Ellen came up behind him. The man was crouched at the hearth with a sack of wet dirt in his hands. Younger than she expected. Clean-shaven, blue-lipped from the cold, his face turned halfway toward her. Still wearing the confidence of a man who believed the trap was working. It left him too late. The laundry press struck the side of his skull. He folded onto the hearthstones without a word. Ellen did not look at him twice, because the broken wall was moving. The second man was climbing through it, broad-shouldered, beard rimed white with ice, one hand holding an axe, the other already reaching for her. For one instant he saw the room wrong. A woman rising out of the floor, his brother on the hearth, the dog bursting up behind her with a snarl. That instant saved her life. Rusk hit the man's leg first, not a clean bite, a crash of fur, teeth, and fear. The axe swung wild and struck the doorframe. Ellen stepped into him instead of back. That mattered. People expect fear to retreat. They prepare for a body moving away. She gave him a body coming forward. Her shoulder drove into his ribs. Her weight carried him into the stove. He grabbed her sleeve. The fabric tore. She swung the iron upward with both hands. The blow caught him under the jaw. His head snapped back. He stumbled toward the broken wall, one boot skidding on snow that had blown across the floor. Rusk lunged again. The man fell backward through the hole he had cut to enter. The blizzard swallowed him. For 1 second his hand clawed at the sill. Then it vanished. Ellen slammed the kitchen door bar into place, dragged the table over the trap, and stood in the middle of her ruined cabin with the iron hanging from her hand. No triumph came, only breathing, hers, Rusk's. The man on the hearth, faint and ugly and still alive. Outside, the storm kept working at the house as if nothing human had happened. By morning, the wind had spent itself. The world beyond the cabin lay buried under a hard white silence. Ellen stood on the porch with a blanket around her shoulders and Rusk pressed against her knee. The hole in the west wall had filled with snow. There was no sign of the second man, no track that lasted, no blood she could read. He had either crawled into the weather or become part of it. The first man lay bound beside the stove, breathing through his mouth, waiting for whatever law could reach this far after the drifts opened. Ellen looked back through the doorway. The trap in the kitchen floor stood open. Below it, her cellar waited. Neat shelves, stone walls, iron plate, water barrels, all the proof of her careful mind. For years, she had believed that safety meant going down, going deeper, making the world above matter less. But the storm had not nearly killed her. The men had not nearly killed her. The room had nearly killed her because she had mistaken hiding for living. She would keep the cellar. A person still needed shelter in a country like this. But she would never worship it again. A locked place could save a body from weather. It could not decide when a body should stand. Ellen set the laundry press on the porch rail and watched the pale sun rise over the drifts. She did not feel safe. Not exactly. She felt awake, and that was stronger. The room below her feet had been built by fear. The steps out of it were made by her.